Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Force Strategy Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. In this particular replay, our Protoss player here is Acro, and our Protoss opponent is Mouse's Mana. So this is a mirror matchup, Protoss versus Protoss, and let's jump right into things here. Essentially, what we're going to be looking at today is going for a 3-gate Robo build, but there's a few key points in the game that we're going to want to pay attention to. The first point is defending against early aggression, using your sentries to defend against early aggression, blocking off the ramp, and just doing as much as you can to stop an early aggressive push from an opponent. Particularly in this game, our Protoss opponent's going to be going for a straight up 4-gate push early in the game. So we're going to show you how to defend against that. The second primary point that we're going to look at is the thought process, or the idea of pushing out against your opponent who expands as opposed to expanding yourself. This is something I tell my students quite often, as well as something that I mention quite often here in the video, is that you really have two major choices when you see your opponent expanding. Obviously, scouting is quite necessary to do this in order to be aware that your opponent is expanding. This is one of the many reasons why scouting is very important. But when you're scouting and you see that your opponent expands, you really have one of two choices, the first of which is to expand yourself so as not to fall behind economically, and the second of which is to actually just push out and try to do damage. If you can do enough damage, then you can kind of even things up and then allow yourself time to expand after that point. Or you can even take them out if they've dumped enough resources into their expansion, meaning if they've spent enough on probes and if they weren't building units as a result. So moving in here, just getting some basic scouting information, but let's go back to our base right now because we want to start off looking at that build order. Very typical build order for the beginning, starting off with a 9 Pylon, following that up with a 12 Gateway and a 14 Assimilator. As soon as this Gateway comes up, we're going to be getting that Cybernetics Core rather, and see this other Pylon going down here at about 15 supply. So yeah, just basic stuff scouting. We really want to just check for that second gateway. That was a Cybernetics Core though, so we know nothing fancy's coming. A 2-gate push would be idiotic on this map anyways. We can't really expect that because it's such a far rush distance. It's very unlikely that any Protoss opponent would be going for a 2-gate push on this map. But you want to be certain. You still want to check. You definitely want to know what's going on. The other thing too is that if we didn't see that second building go down at all, then we would have to worry about a proxy building somewhere. Because they couldn't afford to put down all those buildings, and that's kind of something you have to think about. Now here's that Cybernetics Core, like I said, that went down at 16 supply. 18 supplies when we're getting this additional Assimilator here, so we're going to have our 2 Assimilators, and we're going to quite need this. Like I said, we're going to be going for a 3-gate Robo build. Very strong build, also very versatile. As great as the 4-gate is, the 4-gate is a very solid build, but the problem is that you negate higher tech. It's the equivalent really of going for like a 3 racks build as Terran. It's basically the same equivalent. Yes, it can be very powerful. It can be overpowering if done right, but you negate the higher tech, and that can really put you at a disadvantage. So we're going to be at an advantage in going for a 3-gate Robo over an opponent who goes for a 4-gate, in the fact that we're going to have access to observers, the fact we're going to be one step closer to Colossus, and that we're going to have access to Immortals. So it's really a better idea, I think, and it's more solid play style if you get comfortable just going for something like a 3 gateway and a Robo build. It's definitely, like I said, much more versatile, and that puts you in a better position. Checking for proxies right now, very standard stuff. Grabbing that Xel'Naga tower, that would be a great idea. Using a probe would be your best bet, or once you get your stalker out, maybe bringing that over. You do want to see, it's going to allow you enough time to see if any push is coming, and that's going to allow you to prepare and get any necessary units that you're going to need to defend, and just to be aware that you're going to have to block off this front ramp. So what I mentioned earlier is that we're going to be showing how to defend against an early 4-gate. In this game, I'll show you real quick. We don't know this in the game. Realize we don't know this in the game, but when you play your games, you want to be prepared for all these possibilities. So we're going to see right here, you can see our opponent is in fact going for a 4-gate. We don't know that, but like I said, you want to play your games in the sense that you want to be prepared for all these possibilities. I'm going to talk about this timing over here, Robotics Facility. This did go down at 24 supply, 27 supplies when we saw the second gateway here. So being prepared for all these things. Now we see this probe coming up here. We're seeing this pylon being placed down. Right away you know something's funny is going on. Why would he be putting a pylon in front of your base other than to warp in units? So be aware of that. Now we see this heavy stalker. This right here tells us for certain, even though we haven't seen it in the game, seeing that many stalkers this early in the game, this tells you that he went 4-gate. He went 4-gate heavy stalker. It's just that's what he has to go to have this amount of units, and you know for a fact that he's got warp gate as well, because there's no other reason for him to be warping in pylons unless he had the power to warp in units by those pylons. So you know at this point what he's got. It's just a matter of defending. You just want to drop down force fields. Basically what he's trying to do is, if he gets a pylon up, he wants to push up his stalkers just enough to get vision of the high ground so he can warp in units up here. So you need to drop those force fields to prevent that vision so that you don't get units warped into your base, because then you're going to be in trouble. If he has units warped in your base, he's going to have constant vision. He's going to pick off anything you have near the edge. Like right now, if we had any units near the edge, he would be able to attack because that zealot was up there. But that was good positioning on Acro's part to keep his units away from that edge right there. This last gateway coming down, that went down at 44 supply, and then at 45 supply we saw this Robotics Bay. Now basically that major decision that we want to really get Colossus out, the reason we got that Robotics Bay right away was because we saw that push and we knew we were able to defend it. We saw those heavy stalkers, we prevented those pylons that were going to allow him to warp units inside of our base if he gained vision. And at this point, if we make this transition to Colossus, we can be in a really strong spot. Now coming out with this Observer, very necessary. We got those Immortals first because we saw that pressure coming and we wanted to defend. Immortals are incredibly strong against stalkers. This is the unit of choice really. If you have a Robotics Facility up and you see heavy stalker build, you definitely want to get some Immortals out. But then transitioning into Colossus, very good, because Colossus is good against all Protoss grounds, so it's going to be a good decision. Now here's this next major point in the game that I was talking about we're going to be looking at. In scouting, we're going to send out our observer. I'm going to try to get as much scouting information as possible, and in scouting we're going to see that he has an expansion. Now once we see this, that's when that decision is made. In your head, you see an expansion, you have to decide, okay, am I going to grab one of my probes and am I going to expand myself, or do I have a strong enough force that I can push out and try to do damage? Now we see his force right here. Our observer was in his base. We see that he's expanding. We see his army. Sizing our army up against his, it's actually pretty favorable. Now, it may look about the same in numbers right now. Again, we just did scout this, so we had this vision. It might look about the same in numbers, but you have to realize this advantage that you have coming out in just one moment. And that advantage is the Colossus. So knowing that we have this advantage, knowing that he's going to be behind in army size because of expanding. Remember, he's dropping 400 resources here. These are 400 resources that are not being spent on an army. Since we are not dropping 400 resources for an expansion, we can instead use it to warp in units. We can use it to get an additional Colossus. And this temporarily puts us at a really strong advantage. And you want to take advantage of that. You want to push out at this time and try to do damage. Again, the decision is to either attack or to expand yourself. And we're going to be attacking, and we're going to show you here just how powerful a push like this can be. Now, especially having the unit advantage and the Colossus having that higher tech advantage, it's even further a greater decision to push out, and that's something else you should think about. If you have a tech advantage and your armies are about the same size, it's going to be a good idea to push out and try to do some damage. So with our forward observer getting some scouting, we see his army, we see where he's at, and we're just going to be pushing in, and we're going to see how this fight goes. And I'm going to tell you, very one-sided, and the reason is because of all the resources he dumped into here and that we have this tech advantage with the Colossus. Basically, we're not going to lose much, and we're going to do a lot of damage. So here we go, Guardian Shield coming up. That's going to cut back on a lot of the stalker fire. This is a reason why you don't want to place buildings anywhere near the front of your base. Now I know this is the back, but with those destructible rocks being taken down, it becomes an entrance to your base. When you put buildings at an entrance to your base in any other matchup except against Zerg, you are liable to lose them, and that's what you're seeing here. So here's this engagement here, fight's going down, and you're gonna see how much of an advantage it is having Colossus. We're not gonna really lose many units at all in comparison to what our opponent loses. Look, his entire army has been wiped out, and we still have practically everything, and that's really what a tech advantage can give you, as well as pushing out against an opponent who has expanded. So yeah, those were the major points we're looking at in this game, defending against an early push and pushing out during an expansion, and you can just see how one-sided that fight can be, especially with that tech advantage there. Let's go ahead and look at the build order one more time, guys. We saw a 9 pylon, 12 gateway, 14 was our first assimilator, 16 supply was the Cybernetics Core here, 18 supply came that second assimilator, 24 supply was our Robotics Facility, 27 supply, second gateway, 44 supply was that third gateway, and 45 supply that Robotics Bay. We saw how to defend against that. You want to kill off any pylons, don't let him get vision of the high ground, and don't let him push into your base. Use those sentries force fields to your advantage. In scouting with the observer, seeing that expansion, we decided at that point to seize the opportunity to push out. Our tech advantage, coupled with the fact that our opponent spent resources on expanding, is really what allowed us to overcome and basically wipe out his army without much of a problem. So once again, guys, this has been Force from Force Strategy Gaming. If you guys like our videos and you like what's going on here, then please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. That is all moving moving back. So instead of pushing forward with engagement, he decides to pull back, try to defend. Mass Speedling Nidus is what he saw. Putting those force fields down, perfect placement. You just want to stop those Zerglings from surrounding your Stalkers. That's the main goal. If there were Zealots up front, then that would have been fine. They could engage them no problem. But with those Stalkers, you definitely want to prevent the Zerglings from getting a surround.